Hi, my name is Mattia Murray, and welcome to The Longer Road. You are on the longer road if you have multiple intersectional identities that are often marginalized. You've had to work harder to get to the starting line, and you might feel behind. I'm here to provide hope, support, and practical tips, and to let you know that you're not alone. This is part 2 of a 2-part episode, so if you have not heard last week's episode, it might make the most sense to go back and listen to that first, but otherwise you can just jump in. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. Like, how did you figure out what you needed?
Oh, it was the gift of desperation that landed that landed me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, it was the gift of desperation that landed me in 12-step rooms, and I also see it as a bit of a karmic thing. I was asked to lead yoga after a 12-step meeting, after a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and in the process of that, I'm listening to people sharing about their lives based on a topic, and after about 6 weeks, I said to everyone, wow, I can relate so much to the things that you're saying. And I know that drugs and alcohol are part of my own history. However, I haven't had a rock bottom yet around drugs and alcohol. And yet I relate to everything you're talking about around perfectionism, control, hyperfixation, shame, avoidance. And everyone just started laughing at me because they could obviously see it in me before I was ready to acknowledge it in me. And the other piece of this is that if people were sharing so openly and open-heartedly, and I'm like stuffing down my tears because I am thinking to myself, these are addicts, and I'm thinking that they're less than me because I'm not like a gutter snipe addict, and I'm judging them, and yet they're so much more emotionally healthy than what I am. And so I'm getting my ass handed to me in the process of teaching yoga after this 12-step meeting. And so someone comes in the following week and hands me the patterns and characteristics of codependency. And I thought, and like I'm looking through it and I'm thinking, holy shit, like this is me. And, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I'm like, okay. So I stuck it on my fridge and just like stared at it for years. And in the meantime, I'm attending these meetings because I'm teaching the yoga afterwards. But I start then getting curious about other 12-step meetings. And this is a period of my life where I'm like teaching meditation and yoga and making maybe $100 a week because I'm happy. I'm really happy making my own bread, growing my own food, and living off of a really simple lifestyle. I go back to Bali to go and train with my yoga teachers. In the process of figuring that out, I learn about Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And on the day that I leave to go to the airport, I buy a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk because a friend of mine says, hey, you should buy this book on your way. So I end up in Bali, in Ubud. I'm doing some really vigorous yoga every day with my teachers. And the shit that they make me do is like I started standing, I reach up with an inhale, and then I land in a back bend with an exhale. And then I come up to standing with the inhale, and then exhale, I release my arms down. Now, the fuckery of that is you can't do that on your own. You actually have to trust your teachers. And the more you try to do it on your own, the further you're going to get away from being able to do it. And so I'm just like, and then my body's just like doing all this stuff and being like extended all the way open. And when you reach, you have to like actually trust and reach, but you have to stay grounded in your legs. And if you grasp and you want, then your body becomes contracted. So I've got that going on. I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score, and I am coming to the realization that I am a trauma survivor. And this book helps me to make sense of myself and my life, but it just slaps me around like so much. Yeah.
That book fucked me up. It was good, but it was hard to read.
Yeah. And so liberating as well. Right. It's that, I don't know. I don't have any other phrase for it other than like getting my ass handed to me on a platter. So I'm getting that with my yoga teachers. I'm getting that through this book. I am going to these 12-step meetings through Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And my very first meeting, I walk in there and I get there early, and then people are walking in, And I can just tell from their energy, their vibe, that these were my people. And then they pull out the patterns and characteristics of sex and love addiction, and we're reading it out together. And I just burst into tears because it was me. And it was also everyone else that was in this space. And we all had our own nuanced expressions of the core wounding of abandonment that expressed in ways where we couldn't not. And so that was also its own journey in of itself. And yet it was all happening to me all at the same time. And once again, that environmental piece, I happened to be staying on my own somewhere really exquisitely pleasant where I could go and nourish my body for like less than $20 a day in terms of food, and stop my life in order to do that work. Or rather, life stopped me and forced me to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot to come together at once.
Yes. 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 Yeah. I really get it when people pick up the body keeps the score and then they put it down because it's just too much. I really get that. And I really get it when people start going to yoga class and their body starts to open up and stuff comes up and they're like, I'm not going back to that ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And I really get it when people turn up to a 12-step meeting and they're like, yeah, can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a period of time where every time I did yoga in a class or on my own, I cried every single time, where it was just like every single time was a big emotional release. I've had times in yoga classes where I've had like really intense flashbacks based on a specific physical thing or something. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess that was a thing that happened that I forgot about.
Yeah.
that very, so absolutely. Yeah. Some of that. And then there are, of course, other people who are like, oh, yoga is it's so gentle and it just opens me up in this really lovely, gentle way. And I'm like, cool. Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. Yeah, I did yoga. I'd go to classes so I could learn yoga so I could do it on my own, because when I was on my own, I could actually let go into my own body.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's a journey. Like, it's such a journey. But, if it weren't for yoga and meditation, I don't think I would have stabilized my mind and been able to befriend my body enough to become aware of the ways in which I can't not.
Mm.
You know how we talk about fight, flight, freeze, and flop? Well, there's also fight, flight, fix. And I was a fight, flight, fix person, yeah?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Control is my drug. And my superpower is to be able to predict, because if I can predict, then I can control better without making it look like I'm controlling.
Well, and the fix is so alluring because if I'm the problem, then, it's funny because there's this, messaging in certain parts of the self-help community that are like, take full responsibility for your, your blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I'm taking too much responsibility. I believe that everything is my fault and that I am the problem. And that if I just if I can fix myself, that it will somehow fix the structural inequities in my life that have led to a lot of these problems. It won't. And it does not do it in retrospect either. Spoiler alert. You don't reach a point of healing and then look back and have your past not suck.
Yes. And see, I was the other side of the same coin, Matea. So I was the fix everyone else around me.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. So I was that person. And so my heart goes out to people who get labeled as control freaks, because for some of us, whether it's fixing other people or fixing yourself or flip-flopping between the two, flip-flopping between like grandiosity and self-loathing, for some of us, fix is a survival imperative that then got overlearned, and we go back to it over and over again. And then on top of that, we add some neurodivergence where finding the answer gets us dopamine.
Yay!
Yeah, I found the answer. Dopamine. And so our superpower then becomes so seductive when we're at the edges or outside of our windows, because it works so well when we're inside the window. So we go to that when we're to the edges or outside of the window. Yeah. Oh, I've got my hand on my chest. This might be a moment for some self-compassion.
Mm.
That's a yeah. That how is your journey with self-compassion been? It's a horrible word, isn't it?
Yeah, right. It's I'm sure there's always more that can develop there, but it's so much better than it has ever been. So that's nice. And I think the thing that has really been integrating for me lately around self-compassion is not just the emotional component of it, which is obviously, very important, the self-talk and the sort of the thoughts that my brain feeds me automatically, the habitual thoughts are so much better than they were. But also I feel like it's really leaking out into the basic day-to-day, just little things that I do as well. So, for example, something I said out loud to myself the other day was, I can wear gray socks and be happy because I was wearing black pants and I reached for the socks and I grabbed the gray ones accidentally and then I started putting them on and I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh my God, brain, if you could calm the fuck down, that would be great. And it's, so to use that extremely tiny, silly example, it would have been fine if I had changed my mind and put the black socks on at any point in the day. That would have been fine. It was fine. It was a nice moment with myself to just be like, haha, brain. Oh my God. Like to be able to give myself that compassion in the moment. But then also like the thing that I notice in slightly bigger examples is when my system is asking me for something that the little puritanical part of my brain, I think, especially having been raised an evangelical pastor's kid, like, right, those messages are very strong in my history of like, you don't deserve to feel good until you've worked hard. You don't deserve basic love and compassion and, being seen and held until you've achieved the thing that you're supposed to achieve and proven yourself. And it's so much easier to just let myself have pleasure or give myself the reward before the task, because that does give you some dopamine and sometimes it makes it easier to do the task rather than waiting until after. And when I learned that trick, I was like, game changer. Reward first.
Yes.
So yeah, all those little things. And then just, knowing that the way that my system works, to go back to the sort of cyclical, seasonal, or, the patterns of needs, that I have days where I can do a lot and produce a lot, be very creative. And then almost all of the time, if I have a day like that, I need a day or two where I don't have anything scheduled, or it's like a very, very light, and where I'm not demanding anything of myself. And that works really well. And it's, one of the reasons that I'm self-employed is because that's just what works. And when I try to make myself do the same thing 5 days in a row for 8 hours a day, there's nothing in me that can do that sustainably for a long time.
I remember the days when I'd only have one thing on my schedule a day,
Mm-hmm.
and not even on the schedule, one thing to do, like go to
Yep.
the bank and deposit this check. Like that was that was enough. And getting that one thing done was actually enough. And I look back and there's a part of me that feels shame around that. And then there's also a part of me that feels really glad that I was able to really recognize what I was capable of and what was too much for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm at the point too where, people essentially ask me sometimes, how do I trick my brain, my neurodivergent brain, into doing things? And I'm like, yes, technically I know how to help you tips and trick your way into making your brain do a thing, but it's not a sustainable way to live. And it's not what I'm interested in really teaching people how to do. And what you're describing, the like figuring out what you need, actually hopefully having the space and community and support needed to do it for some period of time, right? And maybe that's just finding a small period of time where that is possible, if it's not, if you don't have the big structural supports. But actually doing that, again, it's slow, it's not sexy, it's not big, it's not psychedelic,
No.
but
No.
but it's sustainable.
Yeah.
and once that like base of self-trust is there, and the, to talk about like parts of yourself, in IFS style, like that you trust that you're going to take care of yourself. Like my inner child is very, or I should say my inner 3-year-old is like very much a 3-year-old, right? Like you're not going to win every argument.
Yeah. Once you learn how you learn, you can learn how to do anything.
Mm,
Yeah. And yet we live within an education system that doesn't actually teach you how you learn. It doesn't
right.
provide an environment that is conducive to you figuring out how you learn. And yet so much of adulting is that. It's like, it's me figuring out what are the supports that I need in order to make my life functional. What are the supports that I need in order to reach the goals that I want to reach? And how can we do this together? And that we part has only come about in the last couple of years for me.
Mm,
So I'm 45. So the we thing only started happening sort of around the age of 30, 43. And so it really is a process. Yeah, my partner was very, very good to me during that process. I mean, I remember we'd write down the list of the errands and then he'd sit there and go, okay, let's put them in order. I mean, this is when I was like going, I'm not going to do drugs anymore, right? And my brain was just so scrambled, and he'd help me put them in the order because my brain would make a mental map of town. And then we'd walk out the door and we'd get into the car and I'd be like, okay, let's go here. And he's like, that's not the order that we agreed on. And I'm like, oh, like it was. And then I'd be, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. We'll go there first. Okay, and then we go there, and then as soon as we'd done that one thing, it was like it wiped my brain clean, and then I would just go to whatever was floating around next instead of like the order that actually made sense. Yeah. And his patience in slowing me down in the process of that actually caused me to recognize how scrambled my brain was and how
mm,
like what drugs had done to my brain. And so and that's reality. And so when it came to me thinking about going back to school, I knew that I needed to take some college classes that weren't like it, I needed to take it in baby steps. Yeah. And so I would just take one class and I'd add one class into my reasonably spacious life, and I saw how that one class like just really threw my nervous system all over the place. And it was like a reading and writing class, where you have to write something every week, and they'd make you read a piece, and it was like it actually took like 20 minutes, and I hadn't ever read anything for 20 minutes, not for like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years at this point in time. And I actually had to read it over like 4 times before I could synthesize a response to the question prompt that was actually coherent and not like a shallow answer. And that was also reality. Yeah. And if I didn't put myself through the experience of learning how I learn and meeting life on life's terms and acknowledging the reality, I would have kept doing the thing that I'd done in the past, which is shooting myself. Why is this taking so long? This should take me faster. It's back to that accountant story. Why aren't I saving
yeah.
more money? It's like, well, hang on, let's actually work with reality. And then based on reality, we can then recognize shifts and gains, and we can get curious about what has contributed towards those shifts and those gains.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a form of self-compassion, I think, as well, of the, just recognizing, and curiosity is a compassionate stance,
yes.
right? Where when a little kid does something, we're usually, as long as we're not too frazzled, curious first. Like, oh, I wonder why they thought that was a good idea.
Uh-huh. Yeah, my partner, every month or so, I say to my partner, I've got my period. And he looks at me and he goes, Oh, again. The fake surprise in his voice and the curiosity. It just lightens everything up, right? And that compassion piece enters. Yeah.
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 Oh, I find I say that to myself, like, when I make a mistake, it's like, "Again," and just like my period, it's like, "Here it is again.
Yeah.
Here I am again,
Yeah.
and here I am again, and again, and again."
Yeah. And we
Mhm.
can be in that and allow that and have that curiosity and that compassion and not have it be like, it doesn't mean that you can't change or grow. I mean, change and growth is inevitable, but
Yeah.
you can still want something different to happen next time and be compassionate in the moment. And I think that's the thing that, again, from, just some of the societal messages I received was very hard to do because it was, and I hear this all the time around neurodivergent people who feel lazy. And I don't believe laziness exists, to be clear, but like I just hate that word. But people who feel that they are lazy or that they are procrastinating, which is again a totally valid nervous system response to stress, but that people will describe that as, but I have to be hard on myself because otherwise I won't change. And it's like, actually, stressing yourself out more and making, feeling like you're in this enemy position with another part of yourself is the least effective thing. Because if somebody outside of you were to come at you with that energy, you'd be like, fuck right off into the sun. No, thank you.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's not how I want to approach this.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think it can also be a message from your nervous system that the environment isn't actually supportive of you.
Yeah.
Like, when I had to pick myself up by my bootstraps and get myself to work every day and beat myself up in order to make that happen, in hindsight, it was a sign that that job wasn't the right fit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've been thinking about that so much too with having learned a lot of tools myself that yes, I may, be able to get myself through a difficult social interaction with someone who I find challenging and, love myself and work, be okay afterwards and get myself to okay. Or I could just not do it. Like, just because I have the tools to get through it doesn't mean I need to live this way all the time and like constantly be self-soothing.
No. And especially for someone who takes over responsibility, it is important to actually check in and let yourself know that just because I can doesn't mean I have to.
Yep.
Yeah. And the flip side's also is also just as true. Just because I don't want to doesn't mean that I can't.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
capacity for discernment, I believe, only arises within that space of self-compassion and curiosity.
And having it, then it actually feels like discernment and a real choice as opposed to just running away from one of the options.
Yes.
Not that
Yes.
there's anything wrong with that if you need
Yes.
to run away from something.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes. Oh, that how you speak to yourself piece.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. So I was running this late this morning to get into the office where there's high-speed internet so I could be here with you this morning, Matea. And what has shifted for me in the last few years is the way in which I talk to myself. So, there's that thing that happens, like, just when you're about to leave the house or you're gearing up to leave the house, that's when my body gets a spike of adrenaline and cortisol because now I'm in action. And then my brain starts to focus in. And then I see all the things that can get done that only take 15 seconds. And now I have the energy and the focus to get it done. And I can just like see it all lined up. and, and so oftentimes that's what causes me to become late. And then I ask for, I'll let you know I'm going to be late. And then I feel the relaxation. It's like, oh, okay, I've got some space now. And then, but it's that thing of the nervous system. And what I do now is I'm able to redirect myself and go, it's okay. Let's go put on your shoes. But before your shoes, where are your socks? Sock 1, foot 1, sock 2, foot 2, shoe. Clomp, 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 let's get your bag. You get the idea, right? And I never used to sing it, but lately I've started singing it. But it's that piece where I'm reparenting myself. I get to hold my own hand, and I get to hold my own hand and give myself this much information, like an itty bit, just the next right thing. The next right thing is let's find our socks. The next right thing is let's find our shoes. The next right thing is sock, shoe, or however the order you do it. And in the talking to myself or the singing to myself, it just keeps me on track in a way that is more ventrally mediated and ventrally regulated rather than beating myself up. Why haven't I got my shit together yet? For fuck's sake, you're 45 years old. How many times? Come on. And then I can't find anything. and then you're putting on grey socks. And it's the end of the world.
Well, and when, like, in those moments, if I'm stressed, I don't have the capacity to self-soothe in the same way and actually let it be okay. I can say the same words, but my body does not believe me if I'm at the same time being mean to myself about, why haven't I gotten my shit together yet?
Yes. Yes.
And I also talk aloud to myself and sing to myself constantly. So that's, yeah. And the verbalizing for me helps me actually take action, and also helps keep me on task and literally remember what I'm doing, but also like with those steps, what is the next thing, which sometimes it's easy to forget. So
Yes. Yeah. And that self-talk, and I do it out loud, right? What it does, it allows me to move on into the next moment with my nervous system being more full and nourished and able to turn up and to then be able to discern. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I don't like turning up for people when I'm feeling uptight. And I think in the past, with a nervous system that's more sensitive, I would get uptight more, and then I'd avoid people, and then I'd beat myself up for avoiding people. Yeah, I'd want people to be around to help my nervous system to feel better, but I didn't know how to do that, and it would just become its own vicious spiral that actually lasted for years. Yeah. And see, now we've had this great time. We've hung out together. I'm able to then move on into the rest of my day, having more capacity for the other people who will come my way, and having more discernment for other people's nervous systems. Because part of the beauty of learning about this nervous system work is that it's not about being in ventral all the time. It's about tapping into the greater field that allows me to know that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so running late this morning, I'm like tapping into the greater field, and I'm like, it's Matea. We love each other. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. We're professionals. We'll make this work. It'll be okay. And that also helped then to tether me into that ventral energy. Also knowing it's okay to have a meltdown. Yeah. And with my clients, if I'm doing things, if I'm holding the space and I'm tethering myself into the bigger space, then this space can be somewhere where your nervous system feels safe enough to actually go into your meltdown, big emotions, in order to complete the stress response cycle and have that be normalized.
Yeah.
Because that is the harm. That's the harm. We had meltdowns and people weren't there for us in the ways in which we needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, that's the next beauty. That's the beauty of this work that you're putting out there into the world, is we can then find our people. We can have meltdowns and be loved no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And that journey, the CPTSD journey of I'm safe enough around myself, and now I'm safe enough around a therapist, and now I'm safe enough around friends.
Yes. Uh,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. Yeah. What a gift.
it really is. Thank you so much for being here. I do want to wrap up, and I have so thoroughly enjoyed this. It's been really lovely to connect again. And of course, I mean, uh, your wisdom, your hard-earned wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing personally about your journey as well. I think that that's, I mean, for me, it's one of the most helpful things to hear is just these, the kind of the nitty gritty of what people have gone through. And I always get something out of that. Just like, I'm sure this is an episode probably going to go back and listen to a couple times myself, just like, oh, right. That little detail. There's so much goodness there. So, how can people find you? That's one of my last questions. And then also, do you have any, uh, not everybody loves the word advice, but do you have anything you want to say to yourself at another age? Like
Mm,
a message for yourself at another age?
sure. So firstly, it's www.linda-thai.com is the website. And there's an interview section in there and a resources section in there where there's lots of free resources and interviews where you can listen to me gas on with with folks. And in terms of words for my younger self, it will get better. It will get better. And your condition is not your identity. Your condition is not your identity. It might feel like this is who you are forever. And yet, I want to remind you that these are circumstances, these are conditions. It is not your identity. And at some point, you may wish to reclaim your identity and say that loud and proud. I'm a former child refugee. I'm recovering from trauma. I'm in addiction recovery. I have a neurodivergent brain. I see the world differently. And you will find your people. And once you find your people, life will get easier. And that in and of itself will be its own journey, its own delicious journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
can I ask you that question, Mattia? Like
Mhm.
right now, today, in this moment, what would you say to your younger self?
You're not broken. And just generally that it's not you, like I didn't even know that what I was experiencing was trauma until closer to adulthood, basically. So, because it was so normalized, and my two best friends growing up were also domestic violence situations. So that was all I saw. That was all I knew for families. So, I think just knowing that it wasn't me, it wasn't my fault, and that was, I wasn't even having those thoughts yet. It was just the bedrock of just believing there is something wrong with me.
May I offer you those words?
Oh, sure.
Ah, Mattia, it's not you. You're not broken. It's not your fault. It never was. There's nothing wrong with you.
Thank you.
I love it.
Yeah.
The sirens outside your
Oh, yeah.
window start. It's like
I very much live in a city. Yeah.
coming to rescue you.
I think there are probably siren sounds I have to cut out of almost every podcast. Or like a car alarm or a car honk or something. Yeah,
Yes.
it's yeah. Oh, I also wanted to share that, and I can't remember whether this was in the 12-week thing or in some other thing that I did with you, but I remember that there was it was the exercise around like reaching. And then I remember there was some moment where you reached toward the screen. So you
Mhm.
were reaching for us. And again, I don't remember exactly what context that was in because it's been a while,
Mhm.
but I have experienced things like that in other contexts. And yours was the very first one where I was actually able to accept it and like enjoy it. So that's one of the reasons I like your work so much, is just because I have that, trusting, safe enough relationship with you that you can offer me things that my nervous system can actually accept. and not just sort of sit on a shelf over there like, yeah, that's nice. Which is nice try.
Oh, well, Mattia, I take such delight in you, and this may or may not come across on the podcast, but I'm going to do it. So I'm going to reach through the screen, and if you want, you can lift up your arms, and I'm going to slide my hands underneath your armpit. Right, I'm going to slide my hands underneath your armpit, and then I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to pull you towards me. And we're going to rub noses. I'll lift you back up again. And then put you down.
So that was Linda literally lifting the computer. So it gives you the visual. It is very silly and very fun.
Yeah. And we get to imagine possibilities. And that's when you're able to imagine new possibilities for yourself, that's when we start to make a little bit of movement. Yeah. And I know if we did that in real person, you'd be like, get away from me.
Yeah. No, too much. No armpit touching.
And so there's so much beauty in the Zoom space and in the podcast space and in the electronic space that I feel that some folks don't appreciate. Yeah. Or they don't have the appreciation that for some of us, that we get overstimulated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And being able to, be in your classes and, turn the camera off when I needed to. That was, I mean, one of the most helpful things in the pandemic for me total, but also just, really starting to realize my own needs around, wow, I need a lot of space to be able to integrate and hear these things. And like, I can't be thinking about my facial expressions, and that's just like one layer too many when I'm processing this much stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so glad that the experience landed for you as learning how you learn and learning what you need.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome.
I will very likely be splitting this into 2 episodes because we talked for a long time.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'll put your link in the show notes so people can easily click through to your website and see what you're up to and how they can find you and hear more of your brilliance. And
thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks, Mattia.
Thank you. Talk to y'all next week. Thanks for listening. If you know someone who would be helped by this podcast, please share it with them. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions at mattia@mattiamurray.com. That's MATTIA at MATTIAMAUREE.com. Thank you.